Hello. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and program normally until anybody shows up. We'll see if that happens at all. draw this, do we actually use the viewport position or the draw rec position? Here we go. So viewport, we save, and then we do deflate viewport offset, which is viewport rect top left plus viewport padding, which is globally here, so we can actually. Oh great, let's just use that. If track of a maximum height here. Max. Actually, let's call it. Y. Really good. Max Y. Actually, I'm going to reorganize this. It's on the left side. Okay, great. So then we moved over all the buttons. We got a max Y. So the height of this display area is going to be display area.y equals max Y plus 5 times C scale RC font basic font. Nah, we don't really need that. We'll just say plus 15 or something like that. And then input display area dot height equals menu direct dot actually plus height, and this is actually correct. Minus input display area dot y, and this can equal, and then we can do if app input method equals output method keyboard mouse. Yeah, we can put keyboard mouse. If input this controller else method Xbox controller. Right now we'll just do the same thing. Alright, but this actually takes a bunch of options, so we actually need to pass the draw rec, which is this rectangle that we just created. Input display rec. Display area is what I called it. Outline color, white. Active color is purple, I think is the default option here. Primary color. Oh wait, that's the white. Okay. Transparent. What's that too normal? Viz white, viz white. That's the active color. Show buttons list, I think, is what makes it so it doesn't show up active. So white. Primary color, secondary color. Okay, so this is purple, and then transparent. Need that. And we're gonna do the same thing for these guys. Hello. Okay. So what we're working on right now is when you start up the game, basically it goes through the little studio logo, and then it plops you on this settings page, which allows you to set the volumes and the language and maybe a couple other options later. But it also hopefully will give you a very concise version of the controls as they're currently bound. So we need to render this this temporary version of the visualization of the keyboard kind of in the center of the screen here, and strip down a lot so it just highlights the main buttons that you have, which would be the arrow keys, Z for activate, and R for reset, and backspace for undo. So that's the plan. We do have another little visualization here for a PlayStation controller, which will be the same thing. I'm not sure exactly how dynamic these are going to be. For now, for example, the keyboard buttons, or the arrow keys, can technically be mapped to any button, but I think we're just going to assume for now that it's the arrow keys, and we're going to draw a nice little outline here, and a little line up and some text explaining what the arrow keys do. Same thing for Z and backspace and that kind of thing, right? And hopefully we can kind of reduce the amount of clutter here with all the other buttons that show up as transparent. So we will see how this goes. For now, we're just getting this centered in the screen so it's not overlapping on the continue. Little hint there. All right, so that should be disabled. And this guy is not rendering anything right now. Let's just try doing draw rectangle, input display area, something like that. We'll see if we got our rectangle correctly placed on the screen. Nope, that is wrong. Okay, so input display area equals viewport rec. The Y position would be this max Y, which comes from the maximum. Let's just do this, see if that's messing it up. So that should put it at the top of the screen here, but still not there. So then viewport rec is maybe not what I think it is. So let's go settings, menu, functions, update, menu recs. Viewport rec starts at 000. Draw rec.x. Settings menu equals controls. Oh, well, yep, it's not what I think it is. So the viewport rec is only used on the controls submenu because we actually have a scrolling list of key bindings that you can go through that actually lies inside of a viewport. So we can't actually use that. That's different than I thought it was. So why do these guys use it? Base offset. If button and view, oh, that's what it is. Okay, so if we're drawing the viewport, it comes from the viewport offset, but actually we want base offset. So back down here, viewport offset is actually like that, and we don't really need to check if the button is inside of a viewport because none of the ones on the main page are inside of a viewport. We're only using that on the controls right now, so that should do it. That should bring us a nice rectangle. Nope. Okay. Buttons max Y. So okay, let's check to see base offset.y, display area.y, buttons max plus 15, and then we're still using the viewport rec there. So we actually just want to do draw rec. There we go. Except for now, it's not offset. It should be below the buttons because we have this for loop enabled. Let's see. So if buttons max Y is less than this guy, button rec plus button height. Button rec plus button max height. It is sizing this. Is it sizing it correctly? Does that actually come from the height being short? Maybe it's way off the screen up above. Oh, our height is negative? Okay, so... Oh yeah, because viewport rec is still running. Man, this is biting me in the butt too many times. Okay, so the draw rec height, or the draw rec y plus draw rec height will bring us down to the bottom of the screen here, and then we subtract off this y position that we calculated to be after all these buttons. And now we have a nice rectangle, and it's drawing within there. But now we need to actually subtract off. We have this little continue button here. Though we don't actually, we only calculate where it's at right here. We don't actually calculate it beforehand in our update menu rex function. So maybe we should do that. We're gonna have to restart the game here so we can add a rectangle. Rec continue, or let's call this hint button. I might use this later. We might have some, I often call them hints. At the bottom left of the screen will actually display what keys you can use to navigate or to interact with whatever you're doing. So like, for example, in the editor, it'll give you some hints about what buttons do what so that you can reference those, and it can kind of be a hint for people that are just learning. So hint buttons might be a thing that we do later in the settings menu, but we're actually working on a toned down version of the settings menu at the moment. So this kind of starts up in a unique state whenever you start the settings menu from the intro app state, which means that it doesn't have a bunch of other options that would normally be there in the settings menu. So anyways, all this to say is the continue suggestion is really important at the beginning because they haven't even pressed any buttons yet, or might not have pressed any buttons yet, and they need to know what button to press to continue playing the game. So right now it really is just for that. So let's just make it that for now. So continue button rec, or I'm going to call it a hint. So now that that's there, we can actually compile the game and start it back up so we have that open still. I am using a nice option on most operating systems that you can actually make. You can make windows be floating, as they call it, or sometimes they call it topmost. Basically, no matter what else I have selected here, I can keep this window on top. Generally, like in Windows, you would click on this, and this window would fall behind the window for Sublime Text. But this is really nice. It allows me to kind of program the left and see the game on the right, and hopefully that makes it a lot nicer to watch. Okay, so the continue hint rec needs to be set in here. So we're going to do rc find font, resources, pixel font, 3.0f. I should probably make a define for that so it's not just a magic number here. I'll do that later. So menu, continue hint rec, actually we need to first calculate, let's do const char, continue, stir equals, continue. And I suppose this actually only needs to be updated when we are in this special version of the menu at the beginning of the game. So we're actually going to just put if settings menu, what do I call it? Reduced mode. Reduced mode. Then we actually have this continue hint. So we need the string, then we can calculate the size using our render context measure string. So v2 continue stir size equals rc measure string nt for null term. Continue stir. Okay, now that we have the size, we can do the calculation that I was doing right here. So let's split this out so it's easier to read, especially with half of the screen not usable at the moment. I usually work with 3 screens, so I have 2 screens, one on left, one on right, and so I'll often have the game playing on a completely different screen. It won't take up the right half of the screen of the main screen here. But since we can only stream 1 screen at a time, we're just going to go with this for now. Okay, so the size of it should be exactly the continuous stir size, width, and height. So that should calculate a little rectangle, right? See, we do drawRect plus half of the, here we go. DrawRect.x plus half the width will bring us right in the middle of the screen here, and then we actually need to subtract continuous stir size dot width divided by 2. This is why I stream, because if I have to actually explain it, I'll catch a lot of my bugs before they even happen. Okay, so yeah, we go to the half of the screen here, and then we subtract half of the width of the string that we're going to draw, so that when we start drawing it somewhere slightly left of center, it'll continue and be exactly centered. And then y plus the height of the drawRect brings us all the way to the bottom, and then we subtract 5 times the scale of the font that we bound. So right now we just have it hard-coded to 3 times scale, which means like a 3 by 3 square for every pixel in the pixel font. And then we use this function rcmax extend and down to take into account any space of characters that hang below the draw line, so that way they don't fall off the screen or out of the area that we want them to. Okay, so, and then we do continuous. So this gives us a rectangle here, a semicolon, and then we can use that rectangle over here, which means we no longer really need the size. We do need to keep the string around here, and the problem with having a magic number here and here is that we have it in both places. So if we change one, we could potentially cause some bugs. So we're going to go ahead and make that a define here. So settings, int, font size. I'm going to do at defines. Close that. Our big long to-do list file, or sorry, it's not to-do list. This is our defines. The wonders of working in C is the preprocessor. 2.0. Actually, we can just do 3 here. Okay, so that's there. So then we can put that there and there. Great. We still have the same problem with the continue string, to be fair. I mean, it's not. I don't change these as often. But technically I could change the string here and it would render kind of correctly, but then it wouldn't be centered correctly because our size that we calculate over here when we set up the rectangle at layout time isn't going to match what we actually go to draw at draw time. So I don't know. I could make defines for this kind of stuff. At the end of the day, it's going to have to be localized in some way. We don't have a whole ton of text in this game. We do have a lot in the editor, I guess. Anyways, at the end of the day, it's going to be localized, so we're going to have to make like a call to some function here anyways. That will change what the string is and what font we're using based on what language is set, but we haven't gotten to that. So for now, we're just going to go with the simplest possible thing. Well, it's like a balance of simple and effective, I guess. A little bit of planning for the future. Okay, so instead of doing this, we can just do settings. Called it our continue hint rec top left plus 2. We don't need to, so we start at the left of that rectangle that we defined, and we just need to go down based on how tall the font is, or how much of the text lies above the baseline of the text where we need to start drawing. So that is rcmax extend up instead of down. And again, that's contextual, so it actually, the return of this actually changes based on what we bound as the font in our render context. So since we bound the pixel font at this size, it'll give us the correct height there that we need to offset by. Okay, so that should put our continue string there, and then this guy needs to be fixed because he was using that size, but he was only using it because he needed to recalculate basically the same position. So what he actually wants to do, he doesn't need to do this. That's the same as settings menu continue hint rec.x. So that would be the left side of that left side of that rectangle. Okay, all that should do nothing, but at least it compiles correctly. Oh, somehow we had messed up. Oh no, it just changed where that was. So we'll fix it when we actually can see it better. Let's, so this guy now, instead of being like the bottom of our draw rec. We actually want it to be like the top of that new continue hint rec that we made. So we're gonna go continue hint rec dot y minus, I don't know, we'll give it some padding of 15. Padding and other things like that is also another one where it's like sometimes I'll make defines, but if it's not used more than once, does it really matter? Okay, so now it's left some space for this guy, and you know, some padding here, but this guy now is not correct. He needs to be to the left of the continue string. It looks like maybe the continue string is actually in the correct position. Oh, no, I know what it is. I'm asking, when I go to actually draw the string, I'm asking it to align it in the center. If we get rid of all these options at the end, which were kind of pointless besides the centering, it'll default to aligning the text to the left, so it'll actually start drawing from the position that we told it to. And so now it draws there, we have a little escape. Great. We can stop drawing this guy. The purple was just to get an idea of where we were drawing. Now, excuse me. So, back to what I was originally going to try and do. Okay, so basically, this guy is kind of a general purpose piece of code here that I set up a long while back to give us a visual of what is being pressed at the moment. Like I press F, you see it highlights F, and then also since C is the secondary key binding for the same function, it'll highlight that as well. So like you can see here that Z and the enter buttons are all the same game button is what I call it, right? So the primary and secondary options, though I have disabled, it used to be drawing with blue here. I don't know if anybody was here when I actually had that, but yeah, it used to be drawing the secondary options of blue, but I turned that off. So so what we want to actually do here is we want to kind of, I haven't decided yet, but I think generally not displaying a bunch of these buttons to make it a lot simpler to look at is a good idea to start with. We also don't want to display a bunch of, like we really only need to tell the player about the accept button and the restart button. Oh, no, sorry, there's always three. There's the accept button, the restart button, and the undo button. And the restart and undo are kind of secondary. I mean, it's really, the main part of the game is done with the arrow keys and the interact button. So that's the main thing we need to do. So let's go ahead and we will add a Boolean that can be passed in here. And I don't know, what do we want to call it? Reduced. This is like the fundamentals. It's like the core. Man, I don't know what to call it. Names are hard. Yeah, for now we'll just call it reduced display mode, because that's what we called the mode for the settings menu itself, so we'll just keep that. So that's normally false if nobody passes it. But if they do, what we want to do here, so here's where we actually draw each of the buttons. So we loop over all of the buttons that we had created. They've already been positioned and sized and everything, so all it actually does is the text color change, or sorry, the background color changes to primary or secondary based off of whether or not this returns a valid value. So anything above or equal to the number of game buttons possible is considered invalid value for this function. So this is essentially a wrapper for looking up if there's a key bound, or if there's a game button bound to the key that we're about to draw. So we actually want to only do this. We only want to change it if it's the accept button, the restart button, or the undo button. And so if we're not drawing in reduced mode, this should draw. If we are drawing reduced mode, then it only draws if it's those buttons. So we can do show reduced What did I call it? Names. Reduced display mode. Reduced display mode. Or, so either it's not reduced display mode or it's one of the special buttons that we want, right? So we can actually do, we actually want to pull this out because we're going to need to check game button, game button. I am doing this. I see. So right here, since I don't pass the other two Boolean options, I'm asking for either the primary or the secondary. If either one of them is a game button. Here I'm specifying that I only want it to return the game button if it is the primary key binding, and then for here it's the secondary key binding. So basically, well, let's just do it this way. Let's just say primary game button, and that's true, false, false, true. This is a secondary game button. So the primary game button is that, or the primary game button is equals game button except, or game button. This is going to get long, so we don't want to do this all in the same if statements. What we want to do, let's make a Boolean out here to make it easier. So is reduced game button equals, or is reduced game button, and this should be an and in between there. Okay, so for now, let's just do undo and restart. No, what is it called? The R. We're gonna have to go look at it. App input. R is the right bumper. Oh, that's a weird one. Is that really what I do? I need to work on the names of these key bindings and whatnot. Okay, well, cancel also works. Cancel will be set to X right now, so it's not as intuitive for R, but for the time being, we can just go with that. Because cancel is the one that you actually would use. Cancel maps to B, so, you know, accept would be A or X, depending on whether or not you're using an Xbox or the PlayStation controller. B would be the circle or the B button. Sorry, cancel would be the circle or the B button. And so those are the main two buttons that you use. The X button is the main one that you use to interact with stuff. The circle button, the B button is used to undo. But on keyboard, we have a bunch of stuff that kind of maps multiple times in the game just for, I mean, it's not even like consistency. It's just, it was easier to do that way. Maybe not better. But basically, yeah, we also accept right bumper as a reset button in the game, so you can technically press the right bumper on the controller to reset the character. So anyways, we're gonna display the mapping for the cancel button, but not the right bumper one, because we only really want one. We want it the simplest possible, the least number of buttons here possible to display to the player so that it's not overwhelming when you first play the game. So we also need to put in here, we have the 4 buttons for arrow keys. Those are technically 4 different game buttons. So those technically need to go in here. So that's right, left, up, down, up. This is getting kind of ugly and long. So we're just gonna go ahead and split it, I don't know, maybe every 2, something like that. Something like that is fine, except for this guy. So we're actually just going to split it 3 and 4 here. That makes more sense. Right, left, up, down are all in one line, and then we got accept, undo, and cancel. So those are the main buttons or controls that the player actually needs to know to play the game properly. And And so secondary game button can go there. And this one, we don't actually want to show any secondary key bindings, so we're just going to say not reduced mode, and we don't need to check our is reduced game button variable. All right. That didn't do anything. Oh yeah, because we're not passing the Boolean yet over here in the settings menu. Since it's left out here, it doesn't do anything. So let's do reduced mode, and now we should see a lot of those purples go away. Boom. Okay, so those are the keys that we want. Z, X, backspace, and arrow keys. Now, my approach was to... I like the idea of showing people where the button is bound on the keyboard. So even though it seems like all these other keys are not helpful and we really should just like lay these out like one next to another, I do like having this shown here. And to be fair, this is not, I mean, this is just one layout of a keyboard. I know there's lots of different ones. So to be fair, this isn't actually technically correct in a lot of places, but I think generally, if you have a different keyboard layout, you can see the differences. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I haven't used a different keyboard layout very often. But I think generally, if you have like a European keyboard layout or something else, you probably know what this keyboard layout looks like, which means that, you know, even though I'm showing it this way, you know what I'm talking about when I say the Z button or the backspace button, probably. Maybe not. We'll have to find out when we actually get people to play the game, so. I'm gonna go ahead and close Discord for now. There we go. All right. Okay, so I still don't like, I don't like that we're showing the little hovering. We also probably are showing it when we press the button, so we don't want either of those things, which comes, oh, sorry, we gotta go back over here and put this way. So that comes from this guy. Oh man, these if statements are ugly. Okay, so if there is a game button, the game button's down, or you're hovering over it, or the same game button, yeah, okay. So I'll put a thing around all of this. Let's just go ahead and pull it out so it's easier to read. So we'll say is button down, one game button, and generally we abbreviate the BTN for the game button. So we'll do that. That equals all of that. Basically, this tells us what we used to have in the if statement alone is game button down, but we only want to do that if we're not in reduced display mode. So if we do that, we should see all the display go away. So now hovering over doesn't do anything, pressing stuff doesn't do anything. Great. Okay. Unbindable. Yes, so this guy is the slight blue that you see here. I don't know if you can see that on stream very easily, but some of these guys we count as unbindable, though they still show up in the keyboard display. So we don't actually need that blue, and we definitely, I mean, we don't know, there's no difference between them. Basically, we just don't need that blue for now. We'll get rid of a lot of text and maybe a lot of button rectangles here in a bit, but not reduced mode, display mode. Okay, so that got rid of all of that. Now, so we needed to determine whether or not we need to actually draw this button. So for now, let's try this. If we just do if primary game button doesn't, or is greater than or equal to, did I used to do greater than? Hold on. Yeah, oh, it's because these are less than, or we're checking greater. Okay, greater than or equal to game button number buttons and reduce display mode. We can just continue over this guy, so we won't actually draw this guy. And that should get rid of everything except for the keys we actually care about. Oh. Yes. So everything that's not primary bound. So a lot of this stuff is still bound to other things that we don't care about. So either primary game button is reduced game button. We can just check after we've calculated is reduced game button. Not is reduced game button. And reduce display mode. Yeah, okay. That's even easier to read. Okay. So, that doesn't look like a keyboard anymore. So what do we want to be displayed here? If we want to easily explain to people where the buttons are relative to other buttons, I mean, we could just do this, right? We could let's just copy that guy. Let's say that we don't want to draw the string. So let's see. So is reduce game button, and so hold on. We only want to draw it if we're not in this, or it's a reduce game button. Okay. So now we will only draw the text. We won't actually get rid of all the rectangles or the buttons that we draw around the around each of the buttons, but we'll get rid of all the text of all the other buttons, and that looks nicer. So I feel like the space bar, some of the corner ones like control and escape, those are all nice. Though to be fair, so we're going to be drawing some stuff around these, and then like a little line up to some place where we actually draw the explanation of what that button does. So some of this stuff would be nice to get rid of, maybe like some of the chunk of the main keyboard. We could just keep, like, I don't know, the bare minimum stuff. You could keep the number pad. I don't know, we could just do it like this. This isn't terrible. This is not as yeah, it's not too bad. Let's just go with this for now. Let's just say we're not going to draw the text in any of the ones that don't matter to this display. So we can just get rid of that. I also don't like using continues and that kind of thing, like flow breaking stuff as often. So as much as it can be avoided, that's nice. Let's see. All right. Okay, so now we need to think about, we have these buttons that need to draw some display text above the keyboard. And depending on how many there are, the thing is I do know how many there are. There's going to be 4 display text up here. Because I know that in reduced display mode, there's 4 specific key bindings. I mean, if you count right, left, up, and down all as one key binding, there's 4 specific key bindings that need to be explained to the player. So I actually do know that there's 4 of them, which means I could just evenly space 4 little displays here. And then I could say that the accept one is bound to the left, and then the cancel one is bound to the second one, and the backspace is bound to the third one, and this one is bound to the fourth one. Technically, that won't always work. Like, you could rebind these keys. Like maybe you want a WASD, and so like this guy is going to have a line that draws all the way over to the right-hand side. So that's not perfect, but at the same time, I'm doing a little more work than I need to here. I do want to support whatever key bindings are set, mostly because we might change which key bindings are the default ones, but for most people, they will never see this specific version of the settings screen after they start the game for the first time. So for the first time, they probably have the default key bindings, and so this will almost always work. There's very few people that would actually they can't even really. I mean, unless they knew what the settings config file looks like, and they went and actually made the settings config file before they started the game for the first time, we're always going to have the default key bindings. So, yeah, basically almost never going to happen. The only time it would happen, I guess, is if you started the game and then deleted your save, closed the game, and restarted the game. And then you would get this potentially with whatever key bindings you have. But the number of people that actually change key bindings, I feel like, is relatively small compared to the people that just go with the default ones. So, all right, so let's do that. Let's go ahead and I'm going to actually make this rectangle that we generated before, this one that we were drawing in purple. Wait, no, where am I drawing it here? It's in settings menu, this guy. I'm actually going to make that a rectangle in our settings menu structure so that we can reference it if we need to. That guy. All right, so in order to do that, we need to restart the game because so basically we have hot code reloading, which is what I've been doing most of the time, where I compile and the game immediately updates with the new code. But if we change any of the layout of these structures, so these are kind of like global variables essentially, so like the settings menu, which is what we were in right there, all of the global variables, basically all the state for that menu is held in a single structure. If we added something here while it ran and recompiled, the data from that structure that's held in a specific place in memory is also next to a bunch of other stuff in memory. And so if we just randomly increased it in size, everything else is going to get offset wrong, and then we'd crash, probably. Not necessarily, but probably crash. You're probably going to treat something incorrectly if everything is shifted by a byte or whatever it is, right? Anyway, so we have to close the game every time we add variables to these structures, which is a little inconvenient, but it's also just super inconvenient to have hot code reloading in general. I mean, that's not something you can take for granted in C or C++. So, all right, so we actually want rec control display. I don't know. I mean, it's like this one's. We're gonna have a controls submenu is the problem, so I don't want to call it controls. It's like the explanation at the beginning of the game of what the main buttons are. I'm just going to call it reduced. Reduced is such a great word in this case. Reduced controls display rec. And then we're going to calculate that in our update recs function here. No, I was in the right place. Didn't look right. So settings menu. And then we actually have already calculated it right here. It's basically this. Equals boom. And then we can move that. Base offset wasn't calculated before this, so I guess what is base offset? Let's actually just. It's a pretty simple. It's literally just the top left of the draw rec. Okay, that's stupid. And yeah, we don't need to do top left that way. We can just do Y. Dark to top left. Yes, great. Yeah, so that should give us our same thing, except for these guys need to be replaced with that. It's a long name. Reduce controls display rec. What are you gonna do? All right. So now we don't need to do any of that. We can actually just do this. And then I don't think we need rectangles for these guys. We really just need 4 of them. So we're just going to do reduced controls hint positions poses. You can't really abbreviate position with a plural. I mean, it is. It's not terrible. We're not going to put a plural on it. Reduce controls hint pose, because we're going to always have to sub-index this, so it doesn't look terrible to say reduce controls hint pose sub 0, right? So, meh. All right. So those guys we're going to eventually set here. For now, we're just going to set that 0, and we're going to come back and fill it in when we actually get the game running again. So now that we got our data in that structure, we should be able to start filling it out and using it after the game has started running. All right. So, yeah, so basically, oh, here's the problem. I know, so, okay, if I go back for explanation purposes and draw this again, if you've been here for longer than a minute, you've already seen it. This purple rectangle that we have around this guy. So if I divide this into fourths, well, divide it into fourths and then the center of each fourth, I'd have like text that's drawn out here, and then like here, and then here, and then here. I guess it's a little bit, yeah. Anyway, so you're gonna have some stuff hanging off the left and stuff hanging off the right. That comes from the fact that like the way that this input display function works, it's basically, it's got like the smallest version of the keyboard defined in rectangles, and then it scales it up some whole number of times until it can't fit, or at least one less than it can't fit inside of the rectangle given it. So it didn't take any of this space on left and right here, because if you scaled it up, let's say this was scaled up by 2 times, if you scaled it up by 3 times, it would be outside, like some of the keyboard would be clipped, or would be outside of this rectangle. So it kind of threw away some space here for the sake of having a whole round number for the keyboard size. So it made this decision of like this left side and this right side after we passed it our rectangle, this purple one here, which maybe isn't great because I actually want. Wait a second. I'm putting the positions in the wrong place. That's the problem. So these text displays that we're going to be putting here should be rendered alongside the rest of the stuff. So it should be rendered after we've actually calculated this keyboard rectangle, the one that actually is right around the keyboard. So we're good. We just need to restart the game again. We need to actually put these guys in the input display, which is held somewhere. I think that's in the app. App.h input display, keyboard display, number keyboard buttons, keyboard size. Yeah, so basically here. And there's technically we could use the same ones for the gamepad and the keyboard because we know we're not going to render the gamepad and the keyboard at the same time, but that doesn't feel nice. So I do actually want to make 2 different versions, one for the gamepad display and one for the keyboard display. And this is getting a really long name. So keyboard hint text pose, maybe. Keyboard control text pose. Text pose is too general because there's text inside of each of the keys, and so keyboard. Man, I feel like naming is a lot harder when I feel like people are watching. I'm a shy namer. To be fair, my names don't. I mean, I have a variable called take game window screenshot. Like most people tend to abbreviate almost everything, and I tend to make really long variable names. So maybe I'm just not the greatest namer. Update elapsed times graph values. I mean, it reads correctly, but it's a long dang name. I do bite it a little bit. I do regret it a little bit when I use the variables a lot later after I created them, even sometimes right after I created them. If they're long enough, I don't really remember what they're called, so I usually just go find them and copy them, which you've probably seen. So maybe not the best thing, but I think it's much easier to understand when the variable names are appropriately named. I hate single letter variable names. Maybe hate's a strong word. I tend to be pretty opinionated. Okay, so the keyboard game button, it's like and this is only for reduced mode. So keyboard reduced text pose, that works, and gamepad as well, and no longer there. Controls display rec. Yeah, okay, that's for, yeah. So, gamepad button recs. Okay, basically, this guy, what does this get called? He gets called in initialize, so at the beginning of the game, and every update. So he gets called, constantly. Okay, so if he ever changes, basically every single time, every single frame of the game, we are recalculating all of the rectangles for this display. So if we push this in here, that'll be good. Basically, we, like I said before, we calculate like the layout of that keyboard and the gamepad in its like smallest possible scale, so like a 1 times scaling. And then later on, once we have all those rectangles kind of defined, we just scale them up at draw time to whatever size we can. So basically, this is the one that actually lays out every single button here, right? So like the A button has a specific position in the texture that we use, right? So I'll show you here. Oops, it's not a tiled image. This is going to be in sprites. This guy. It's a DualShock 4 controller sprite that I drew a long while back. Basically, there's a specific position for the X button, which is like somewhere right around there, 165, 71 in pixels here, right? And so we've actually broken that out into code, 164, 71. So yeah, about the same thing. Broken that out to code here, essentially. And not the prettiest way to do it, but it is the simplest way. It's the simplest way for my purposes right now, right? And so this is pretty clean. I like this. But now we want to actually put some text above it. I think as we make this, or once we're done, what do we do here? We copy all of the temporary buttons. So basically, we make a dynamic array on the temporary heap, or it's the temporary stack, basically. And then we just push buttons willy-nilly as we need here. We just do add an item to the dynamic array. And then once we get to the end, however many buttons we have, we actually allocate them on the main heap so that they can stay around a while. And copy them. And to be fair, since this is getting called every frame, this isn't actually great. I don't like that. I think I wrote this code when I was originally calling it once, and then I eventually added it to the update loop because I was working on it and I wanted it to constantly update. But, pushing stuff onto this guy and then copying it to the main heap every single frame. And then also I assume I am dropping, up here I'm dropping it off the main heap so that we can just make a temporary version and then copy it to the heap and then drop it off the heap net frame. So that's not great. Let's probably change that, but I don't feel like doing that right now. Okay, so we need to fill in these positions. Basically, where does that rectangle get defined for the gamepad? DS4 controller, gamepad size. Yeah, so for the gamepad specifically, we know the size based off the size of this image. This image always, it defines the size of our display. But for the keyboard, that's not true. I think at the end of the keyboard one, I just loop over, here we go. All right, so at the end of the keyboard one, we loop over all the buttons that we created, and we find the maximum X value and the maximum Y value, and that defines the size. So when we go to do the keyboard position filling here, right, which is going to be keyboard reduce text pose. This is the one that actually needs to wait till after this keyboard size has been determined, right? Because we're going to use that width and that position of the keyboard to put the positions of the text that needs to be displayed. So we can do that here, and then when we do it for the gamepad, we can do it in the same place, even though we could move this. This is not dependent on any of the stuff that we generate for it, so we could just move this up to the top and then generate our positions there. But for for consistency between these two functions, I think I'll put both of the text position calculations at the end here. And I think we're going to calculate the center of the text so that we don't have to worry about like the size of whatever we're drawing. That'll be calculated when we go to actually render the text. Okay, so yeah, so the first one is going to be the app keyboard size dot x divided by 4. And basically that'll give us 1/4 of the width of the overall keyboard rec. And then, oh sorry, that is width, not x. Oh no, keyboard size. Does width work on vec2s? Hold on. I feel like it should. But maybe that's something I've been meaning to add. Yeah, we have width and height in our vec2 as a union. Okay, so yeah, width is fine. Actually, I know that. I've used that a lot. It's just, you know, when you program and stream at the same time, it's not so easy. Okay, so we need to multiply that. So we either need to multiply it by like 0.5 or 1.5 or 2.5 or 3.5, right? Because that would get us in the center of each of those quarters. So this is just 0.5. Right. Vec2. The y position, I guess we need to do rc bind font at resources pixel font, and we'll bind that at 1 scaling because it'll be scaled up later. To be fair, did we already bind this? No, because the size of the keyboard buttons is fixed, I think. Key size, yeah, that's a define. So if we did happen to use a different pixel font at some time in the future, we'd have to change that define to make it correct. So this is fine. Okay, so we can just do rc max extend down, again, to account for the stuff that happens below the baseline in this font. And it's going to be like a negative amount of that value. But we also probably want some sort of padding between the keyboard and the text that displays. I don't know. We should make that a define, I guess. Is this in keyboard key padding? Yeah, so here we go. So setting keyboard key text. Yeah, that's fine. We don't need to be very large because this is going to be scaled up based on how big the keyboard ends up being on screen. So let's just do 5 pixels. And this is actually more like a function. I have this weird, I used to do some CSS for work, and they have like the distinction between margin and padding, and I used to know which one was which, and I feel like I still do, but I also feel like I might be wrong now. I usually use margin for like stuff that is outside padding, and then with like outside space, like, okay, I have this thing here and it needs to be this far away from something else. And then I use padding for stuff that's like inside space, like, oh, inside of this, there's some padding, or between stuff, right? Sometimes I'll call that padding too, but I don't think I'm very consistent on that anymore. So this is, it has started to confuse me sometimes when I forget which one I mean, but okay, so basically this will offset it by that margin plus, or you know, you could say that this is all negative and we add this together, if that makes more sense. Right, so this plus that negative, right? And so that'll actually put it at a negative relative position to this keyboard rectangle that we're going to generate, which is fine. We'll just, it's useful for us for now. So, okay, so the other two, or the other three, are basically just the same thing, but offset by that. So 1.5, 2.5, 3.5. We could just say that this is, I mean, what is that? 0.25 divided by 2 is 0.125. You could just, yeah, that's not easy to read. Okay. And the same thing goes down here, except that It's not keyboard size, it's going to be gamepad size. And it's not keyboard reduced text pose, it's gamepad reduced text pose. What do we got? Oh yeah, this is old now. Alright, so we can start the game back up. Alright, so now let's just go ahead and get those guys when we go to draw, which isn't here. So when we go to draw the keyboard specifically, we haven't actually tested the gamepad in the same way here. The gamepad we don't actually have to make simpler looking. The gamepad, I know it's kind of on top of the keyboard right now, but it looks like this, right? Where, you know, it already looks relatively simple and we can easily add, well, that's another thing. You might actually want to add text to the left and right on the gamepad rather than across the top. Also, the gamepad is a lot skinnier than the keyboard is, so some of this text, if it's kind of getting long, it might actually overlap each other. We'll get to that when we get to that. Anyways, yeah, the gamepad, we don't have to get rid of text like we did on the keyboard to make it simpler looking. We can actually just use this display and only draw lines out for the ones we actually care about. So, all right. So now we've got our keyboard rect that's scaled up and rounded to the nearest pixel. Our V2, and we're going to call these similar things that we called them here. And we're just going to say reduce text pose. And we're going to do for U8 T index. I don't feel like writing this code 4 times because it's more than like a single line of code. Index plus plus, so we're going to do a loop, and we're going to make each of them. So reduced text pose 0 T index equals app keyboard reduced text pose T index times keyboard scale. This is where we actually scaled up based on how big it actually got on the screen, and then we need to add this guy. Let's just do this in opposite because it looks nicer to me. So draw, no, keyboard rect dot top left plus. So that'll go from the top left, and then depending on where they were here, it'll also get scaled up so that it matches the current scaling. Great. So now we can use these reduced text positions and not the game button list, draw keyboard buttons, draw reduced text displays, reduced mode text displays. If reduced mode, no, it's not. No, we called it. Dang it, what the heck did we call it? Reduce display mode. I keep thinking it should be is or show or something like that, like a verb at the beginning of the variable. It's just reduce display mode. That's not the one I want to replace. Okay. Alright, for U through D2, I'll just use U8. T index equals 0, T index is less than 4, T index plus. Game button. Switch. Game button 0. Game button equals game button accept. So the left hand one is the accept button. And then we'll also maybe have a char display stir equals activate. Oops. Yeah, okay, there we go. Display stir equals, oops, totally typed that in the wrong place. We'll just say unknown here because we shouldn't ever really have it. I mean, the 4, we know we're going to go through the loop 4 times here, so whether or not we had like a default in this case statement seems kind of redundant, but also seems like weirdly like good practice. Like I have so many times where I use a default statement to make sure, kind of like an assertion. I use a lot of assertions where I know that it could technically be a possibility if somebody came back and changed this code, right? Maybe they had 5 buttons and then they forgot to add a case here. It's kind of nice, but then also when somebody comes to read the code, they might be confused why there's a default inside of a for loop that can only go 4 times. So there's no reason you would ever need the default. So it's like sometimes it's hard to say which one is better, whether or not it's harder to read or it's almost just more brittle on purpose, and so maybe you don't want that. But all right, so cancel, undo, and let's see, this is the arrow keys. So it's not a specific game button. It's 4 different game buttons, and I guess I don't really know what I'm planning on doing with this variable, to be fair. No, I know what I am planning on using the rectangle from the game button. So this, for now, we'll make this look nicer later. Right now, we're just going to use the top arrow button, and we'll draw from there, because that'll look nicer, right? Eventually, we'll add like an outline that goes around all 4 buttons and draws a single arrow to the text, right? But for now, we can just use the top one. That's what we actually need for our position. We need one end of that line that we're going to draw. We need to know where it's at. And sort of in order to know that, we have to look it up based off the game button that we're trying to draw. All right, so activate, undo, reset. Let's restart. Reset. Move. Those are nice, easy to read words, right? And I'm not going to add a default. All right. So now we need to know which key it's bound to, and then we need to know where that rectangle for that key is. So we were doing the other thing, the other function for the other way around. We had a certain key we were going to draw, and then we wanted to know what game button might have been bound to it. So we did this function, which looks it up in that direction, but we should have another function that's like get. Oh no, you know what it is? It is just like we just look it up in our settings directly. The settings is set up to say if you have a key. No, yeah, the settings says if you have a game button. Right, if I give a game button index for this array here, it'll give me a keyboard value back, a keyboard button back. So that's just this, essentially. So if we want to do that, look up the other way around, we can just do buttons t keyboard button, and it's already named the same thing. Imagine that. Okay, so then we have the keyboard button. So then we actually want to look up the rectangle for the keyboard button. I believe they aren't. Okay. I need to look up. So I have this list of keyboard buttons. Oh, this one. And they are display buttons, the structure here, which looks like this. And inside them, they say whether or not they are a gamepad button, an alternate button, and this is what we actually want. So we actually want to find the one that is ours. So we're gonna have to loop through it. So we're gonna need this loop. And basically we're gonna have to find, we're gonna loop over, I'm gonna find the one that is actually the one to care about. So if button is gamepad, so if it's not a gamepad, because we're drawing the keyboard right now, and button where was that? It was in abstracts over here. Okay. btn equals keyboard button. display equals button break, because we don't need to continue around if we've already found it. So okay, if we did find this, this should be not null pointer. So if display button doesn't equal null pointer, and I guess yeah, we do need to handle that, because maybe you have unbound one of these keys. I mean, you wouldn't be able to play the game as easily if you unbound, well, almost any of them. But maybe it's unbound, so we do need to handle if it's null pointer. So if we found the display button, that should have a rectangle inside of it. So this draw rectangle, right, is relative, so it needs to be scaled up and positioned relative to our rectangle that we're drawing the keyboard at, right? So we do the same thing up here, this guy. So we're just going to copy that. But instead of button, it is just display, well, it's more, it's display button. All right. Oh, we actually add some padding, I guess. Like the actual rectangle for the keyboard is like somewhere here, and we add a little padding, like right there. That's interesting. Forgot that I did that. Button back to top left, keyboard scale, yes. Then we scale the size of the rectangle by the scale. Okay, so that sounds right. So RC draw line. Let's just see if we have everything working correctly. So if we go from the top left of a button to the position, so reduced text pose 0, actually t index, and we'll just like make that 2 and white. Let's see if we actually get something. Well, kinda. Excuse me. Looks like everything mapped to the enter button. Why did it map to the enter button? So for some reason, did it map to 0? No. We have our text positions correct. Like that looks nice. That's like 1/4 across like the center of each quarter there. So for some reason we found that one. Display button equals button, and then break. And the button has to be the same as the keyboard button, and it has to not be a gamepad button. I think the shape is always the same thing for, it's always rectangles for the keyboard, but we use other ones for the gamepad display. Not that it matters. Maybe they're scaled incorrectly. No. So maybe this is incorrect. We're looking it up. Game key bindings. Maybe game key bindings is not what I need to look at. App settings. Is this guy not added? Okay, he's good. No, that is what I should be looking at. Yeah. And then game button should be one of these guys. And the key binding, the main key binding for that, for this guy, should be Z. Let's double check that. So settings.cfg. So the current settings file looks like this. And yeah, the main key binding for accept is Z. So this guy should get set to the game, but oh, yeah, no, yeah, this guy should be set to game button accept, right? And then we pass it in here for game button accept. We should get out the button Z as a keyboard button, and then when we loop over all of our keyboard buttons, the index, the button value here has to be the same. It's an equals display button equals button. sounds nicer, but why did that not work? Let's just go like this. Let's just say if you map everything to the first button you find, is that the enter button? Maybe that's what the problem is. Maybe it's just always true for some reason. Nope, that's the escape button. So it's not that. This does have some effect here, but for some reason everybody thinks that the enter button is the one that they need. Enter maybe is the first one that's not bound, but it is bound. Maybe there's some other one that's not bound. Is there anything else in this? So is game bad? Is alt? Let's say that. So let's just double check that this isn't an alternate button. So the alternate buttons are like, you have the enter key here, but then you also have an enter key over here. So even though they're both enter in my input library stuff, right? I do want to draw two of them. And so in order to differentiate between the first and the second one when we loop over for stuff like this, we want to take the main one. We don't want to draw to the enter key over here just because it's the first one we find. So we have a couple things that like control is often twice on a keyboard, alt is twice on a keyboard. Those ones actually I guess we can. Some of them I think that we can't actually differentiate on some keyboards between. So even there might be multiple buttons on the same keyboard for the same button. They don't actually show up any different to the operating system. I might be wrong about that, but I think that actually happens. Anyways, so we use it to be able to make multiple of the same button on this little display here. We don't really need, this is not really pertinent to what we're doing, but we can just comment this guy back out. We can say goodbye to the purple rectangle. Boom. All right, so this enter button seems to be the culprit. Let me just confirm that it's the enter button. Maybe there's some other invisible button that's there. Like maybe there's one that doesn't have any size to it, and that's the one we're comparing against. So let's do print line. So keyboard button name, yeah, button. Too many buttons. Too many different kinds of buttons. The index. Oh wait, that's actually this index. And I also want to know t index as I'm printing this out. We're gonna get a bunch of debug output. Boom. Found button 68 for all three of them. Enter. Yeah, we can see that all coming through here. We're going to get up to a few thousand lines of debug output pretty quickly. All right, so we can also double check keyboard button. Get button name and get game button stir for game button. So I'm expecting it to say enters equals enter for unknown. Thanks, Devin. So I know what it is. The switch statement needs to be switching off the T index, not game button, because it's always the same thing. Okay, great. There we go. That's our bug. Yay, that looks nicer. We probably want it to be like the top middle of the rectangle, to be fair, right? So start pose equals new vec2 button rect divided by 2 0 We also could add like a little bit of padding from the top of the rectangle to... no, I think I like it connecting directly to the button, I guess. So line start pose. For consistency, we can do line end pose. Well, for readability, really, this guy. Line end pose. All right, that's pretty readable, I guess. One thing we could try doing, so if we do like a black line, I wonder how this would look. The end of it might look bad, but if we do like a black line that has a larger width drawn at the same start and end position, we actually will get a little bit of like space around the white line that'll kind of, well, you'll see. It's hard to explain, I feel like. Somebody knows what I'm talking about, probably. Oh, that's not even that much wider, but it, I mean, it makes it look a little better there. I'm going to make it quite a bit wider. Let's say 8. So that looks pretty good. These lines... So I have anti-aliasing disabled, which makes them look very terrible, honestly. But we can't... I don't think we can conditionally enable anti-aliasing. Like, if I turn it off, it's off for all triangles that I draw. But I might be wrong about that. Because in this case, this is one of the few cases where we're actually drawing, like, line kind of stuff in this game. Most of the stuff we do in this game is all pixelated, so it's all drawn with, like, you know, rectangles that have textures on them. And so we have anti-aliasing disabled to make it... there's a lot of, like, various things that it helps with when it comes to rendering pixelated stuff, but all right, I think that looks pretty good. Now we just need to actually draw the text. So p2 text pose equals line end pose plus new vec2. We don't need to offset it at all in the x direction. In the y direction, we're doing negative rc max extend down. And so if we're going to use that, we need to make sure that we've actually bound the font that we want to use. Resources, pixel font, scale. And like I did up there, we probably want to add a little bit of padding. So like from the top of this line, we probably want a pixel or two until the text starts. So let's say 2 times RC font. Let's just do keyboard scale. What's that? Alright, that's all negative. RC draw string NT from all terminated text pose. Oops, it's actually the string we actually want to draw is the display string. Text pose white keyboard scale. Alignment center. Hey, look at that. That seems really large. The keyboard scale. How can that seems really large. So, oh, that's why. I forget that there's 2 different places where you can define the scale when you're drawing text. And so if I make a keyboard scale here and then I also pass keyboard scale here, it'll be like keyboard scale squared. That'll be the scale that actually gets drawn. So when we bind it here, it's using that scale implicitly when you draw stuff. So we only need 1 there. Great, that looks more normal. Because yeah, this didn't look like it was scaled up that much. Like the width of these borders here is like how much scale we have. So I bet you it's either 1 or 0 right now because the screen is so small. If we zoom in on it here, yeah, so this guy is only scaled up by 1. So this is literally the smallest we could possibly have the keyboard right now, right? But if I make the screen bigger, you see the keyboard gets bigger. But it's not like a fluid thing. Like eventually the keyboard just gets larger. It's probably the height right now that's limiting it. There you go. See, like right there it goes from a scaling of 1 to a scaling of 2. It's It's really hard to see the black on the black background there, but no, I don't want to save. Yeah, so that's where it finally realizes that it can draw the keyboard bigger, and so it scales it up to a scaling of 2. And then if you go even larger, it draws it up to a scaling of 3. So yeah, right here, if we take and look at it here, you'll see that there is, I guess that's a scaling of 2 still. So yeah, every pixel here essentially has 4 pixels for it. And so, oh, it is. Okay, so the keyboard scale is set to 3, because you see these pixels here in the pixel font are 3 by 3, or are they 4 by 4? They're 4 by 4. So this guy's actually drawing half of the scale for this width, which is kind of a little interesting. I guess maybe that looks better. I forgot that I did that, but these guys are also drawn at half scale, I guess, too. I mean, that's fine, except for maybe when the keyboard scale is 1. Does it maybe never do 1? Maybe it starts at 2. Let's find out if we make our screen really small. So, okay. I mean, I was smart about it. You see that, like, relatively here, if I go back to this, right? This text, right, and these icons here are scaled at 1, and so is the border. It's a single pixel border. But the keyboard scale that I calculated at the top of this function, right here, right, this keyboard scale that I calculated, it's actually set at 2, even though everything's drawn at like a 1 scaling, right? But if I go down to the actual keyboard scale of 1, right now it can't draw at 2 times scale because it wouldn't fit in that area. I don't actually size, like, I thought the problem would be that these guys go down to half, like, 0.5 scale, which would make them look terrible, and that the border would go down like that. But I guess they actually relatively get larger, right? So like this Z button, like, takes up almost the entire button, but then when you go larger from that, it takes up less, right? Does it actually never scale? No, it does scale. That's definitely larger, right? Right? Yeah, we saw that it was larger in Paint. Yeah, so I guess I did it that way. I mean, that's smart, but it's not exactly what I would have expected my past self to do. So, all right. I don't know. Does that look good? We could get rid of the function keys, maybe. We could get rid of... The thing is you technically... No, but we don't care about rebindings. We're going to make this work assuming that you have the default key bindings. And we're not going to worry about it otherwise. So, let's get rid of some buttons. So, tool is... so we want to get rid of like the function keys. We want to get rid of like the insert, and we could keep the number pad around, I guess, if we want to, but not every keyboard has a number pad. The only reason I would not like to get rid of it, I guess, is because if we get rid of it altogether, it kind of looks like our keyboard is weirdly offset to the left, and like the move, for whatever reason, is just like drawn out to the right. So it seems kind of stupid. So I think I'll keep the number pad around, but these guys we can get rid of. These guys we can get rid of. We don't need the escape. We could get rid of all of like the shift, caps lock, tab, control, alt. See, but this is for to answer Devin's question. This is for regular. This is when you start up the game, right? So when you first start up the game, it plays the Piggy Bank Studios logo. I can actually show you, I guess, right? When you first start up the game, it plays, well, it does the loading screen, which has Princess Castle Quest, and then it does Piggy Bank Studios, and this is if you don't have a save file, right? And then it comes up with this, right? And this is our drop screen, so basically you have to hit escape, or we also have cancel, which is X, or Yeah, I think it's just X. Anyways, you can hit escape or X to continue. And so this is like right before the regular game. So for Princess Panic, you do technically have the number pad stuff maybe, or even you might actually technically have different key bindings set. But what I was talking about earlier is this is the first time they've run the game, and it's almost impossible for them to have actually changed the key bindings by this time. So literally almost nobody ever will ever see this thing work where it actually they'll never actually see it to different key bindings here, right? So we actually really only need to support these key bindings, assuming these are the default one. Now, to be fair, we might later in production actually change what the default key bindings are. Like, let's say we want the cancel button to be like shift or whatever, right? So this would automatically adapt to those default key bindings, right? But you'd see that like the undo button is not in the same order anymore. So it would kind of look worse if you bound those two keys in the opposite order. So I've just kind of hard-coded this order here, the activate, undo, reset, move. But yeah, I mean, it's all just stuff. It's all just stuff. So, yeah, this looks pretty good. So yeah, I think I'm gonna get the function key. So basically, is not needed by reduce mode. No, we don't actually want to. We want to check the actual button, the actual keyboard button. So button equals F1 or F2 or any of the Fs. We got 12 of them, right? So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And we probably don't want that many on a line, but for now, let's just go 11. Did I? Dang it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I might have had too many here, so if we do that, yeah, we don't have an F13, though that does exist on some keyboards. I think Mac has an F13 or something like that. Okay, so all of those ones are getting rid of. We can actually separate these out so it's not a massive line. 3s seems nice. Like that. Alright, so those should, well, they're not going to be gone yet. We have to actually use this boolean. So is not needed by reduce mode. So if reduced display mode, and then we can do our continue. I know I said I wouldn't use flow breaking stuff like continue, but here we are. Not what I was expecting, but it's probably what I typed. Reduce and not is, I have a double negative. That's what it is. Why did I type it that way? Not is not needed by reduced mode. Okay, that's a little cleaner looking, right? Yeah. Okay, so we want, I think I'll also get rid of the insert home, like those buttons as well. So insert home and page down, or page up is the first one, I guess. Down and delete. Ah, that looks weird to me now. It looks like the keyboard isn't connected together properly. I mean, if I get rid of the number pad ones, maybe it'll look better then. It's num 0. Oh man, I have a lot of these because there's 10 different numbers. Why do we have to have 10 numbers? It's my question into the void. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Num 10? Oh, yeah, because, okay. Yeah, num 10. We don't have a number 10. There's also, so that's going to be like that. And, shoot. Let's go ahead and separate it by 3's again. 3 is a nice number. Or button. Alright, there's also button, or num enter, which is not a separate key code. Oh, shoot. There is technically enter that is alternate. And button is alt. That's what that one is. Num plus, num add. Sure. Minus. Do they really? Oh yeah, subtract. I guess that is consistent. Okay. So. Multiply. Divide. Add, subtract, multiply, divide. There's also a numlock. Button, numlock. And the period. That's the last one. That's a lot of keys to get rid of. And a very long Boolean OR. Period. Hey, I got all of them. So that's better. I could get rid of the controls. I mean, I think those kind of feel weirdly out there. Control. By the way, Kyle, you can, if you post on Twitch, I'll see it a lot better. Hey, welcome, Command King Official. I actually closed Discord, so I'm not going to see any notifications besides on my phone. So, okay, so I got rid of the control. Now it feels like, well, I could get rid of the alts. The alts kind of are out there. The shift almost feels like it should be gotten rid of, but then I feel like that's going to feel weird. But that looks like a nice keyboard. I mean, that looks simple, right? That looks good. I feel like if I got rid of space, I mean, I could get rid of space. Let's see what it looks like. The thing I'm noticing now, too, is like the keys are offset in the last row. And now that looks kind of weird without all these buttons at the bottom. But it's not terrible. That looks good. I thought that the space would be necessary to make it look like a keyboard, but this does look like a keyboard with all the other buttons, so that looks good. I can get rid of escape now, I guess. Escape. I almost could, it might actually be a shorter list of buttons if I did it the other way around, where I just listed the ones that I actually want. But okay, that looks good. I like that. I think that is nice. One thing we could do here, so the keyboard rectangle that we calculate right here, I always put it at the bottom, like at the bottom of the area. So like we calculated this rectangle that took up this entire area here, but we put the keyboard at the bottom of it, which is not, I don't know, maybe it's not terrible in this case, I guess. Okay, it is kind of weird. Maybe I should make it the undo button that goes continue, or maybe the reset button. Like, I couldn't use the Z button for the button that you continue, because some of these, like, you know, you can press up and down, and when you press Z, it actually does something to the settings. And so I can't really continue with the regular activate button. So I chose the start button key binding, which is escape right now. But also it doesn't list escape, or it doesn't show you escape here. So it seems kind of weird to like, hey, here's all the controls, and then, hey, use this other control to continue. So what is enter is the activate button. So I guess, yeah, we can do the cancel button to continue, I guess is what we really want. Game button cancel. That X is offset wrong. It needs to be moved up some. Yeah, I think a lot of these guys, honestly, like all of them, except for the escape button, should probably be moved up by a couple pixels now. So let's just go like this. There you go. That looks nice now. I feel like this is more understandable. I just recently made this little animation, and I feel like if you animate it, it makes more sense to people that it's a button that you can press. Because like we had the little like rectangles around stuff before. I don't know where I have them, probably in the decorations. Yeah, so all of these guys I used to be using, but people didn't understand that those were buttons. So I feel like animating that helps a lot. I actually thought about maybe putting like a little finger sprite that would be like pressing down on the button, but then I thought that sounded weird. I didn't want to draw a finger. All right, so that's pretty good. So that works for the keyboard, but we actually need to do the same thing for the gamepad, which it automatically switches right now when I press a gamepad button. Well, that's kind of nice. I like that it moves, but I also don't want it to move later. So it is a little interesting. The minute I move the mouse, I think I have it set back to the keyboard, which is kind of correct, I guess. But man, the gamepad is even tinier than... Why is the gamepad so small? Why are they both so small? Honestly, I feel like this should be able to render at a greater scale than it currently is. It seems like it wants... Do I... Oh, maybe I'm not even using the entire space. Maybe that's what it is. So when I calculate the keyboard scale and input display, I probably draw rect.height divided by 2. Oh, I'm saying it can't be bigger than half of the height. That makes sense. I used to, that's why it's at the bottom. I used to just give it the entire screen rectangle as a space to draw, but then I wanted it to draw at the bottom of it. And so I would make sure that I didn't scale it up so that it took up more than half of the height of the screen, but I guess I don't want that anymore. So if I get rid of that, these guys are actually going to draw small, or draw larger. It's the height that is really killing it most of the time. Well, that's the same, but the minute I go a little bit larger, it's good. What does it look like? I know you guys can't see this, but on a 1080p screen, it looks pretty okay. All right, so now the gamepad is a little larger. It's not massive, but I think, I mean, you can still see that, and it does get larger as you get larger here, right? So this is, that's good. That's good. Okay. All right, so yeah, what I was saying is if we actually have a keyboard or the gamepad being displayed, we need to actually draw the little lines and the explanations for what you can press. I guess maybe we should decide whether or not we want to tell people to use the D-pad or the left joystick as the input for movement. Yeah, I like the D-pad better. I feel like it works a lot better for this kind of game. So I'm gonna label the D-pad. But also it's funny because the D-pad is not actually the primary option. So it doesn't show up purple right now. It shows up. It would show up as blue if I had the secondary options showing up. All right. So over back in settings menu right now, jar reduce mode hints. That's no longer true. Jar reduce mode. They're not all hints. Extras. All right, so now we are passing when we draw the keyboard and mouse display. We're telling it to draw in reduced mode, but we haven't done anything for reduced mode in the gamepad. So we're going to add that boolean and add it here. So for now, we only need to add it to the PlayStation controller. I do need to test an Xbox controller at some point. I haven't actually done that. But I need to actually make a sprite for it as well. So, you know, we're a little preferential to PlayStation at the moment, I suppose. So, yeah. So over here, we don't need the settings menu functions really right now. We don't need abstracts or input or app.h. So now gamepad input display. This guy needs another boolean. Display. Oops. Reduced display mode equals false. So our undo button. No, our undo button's fine because we use the cancel button. Yeah, great. Sorry, train of thought in my head. So, is used game button equals when do we actually look up the game button binding? That's here. Okay, I've put this way too high because that's the analog stick. That's a texture. No, it should be up here. The game button's here. Okay, there we go. Let's move that guy up. There we go. The game button accept or cancel or yeah, is it sample? No, it is undo. Okay. Why does that seem weird to me? Okay, so undo is backspace, X is backspace. I've done it wrong. That's what I've done. Okay, so this is wrong. X does undo. Backspace doesn't reset. That's what's wrong about this. The reset button is separate. And I really do want to label that as backspace, as undo. Okay, well, that's fun. Get the controls for my own game wrong. Undo. And yeah, then we have all 4 different arrow key ones, which right. Okay, so reduce text mode displays. Alright, so down here, I'm going to do basically the same thing we did up there. This is the primary game button. And this is the secondary game button. Is reduce display mode, so that I'm missing or there. All right. Yeah, so this is where the reason I realized the undo step was wrong is because the undo button for the controller right now, the primary key binding is actually clicking in the left analog stick, which is possibly the worst key binding you could possibly have. You can push circle to undo as well, but that's technically the cancel binding. There's like a separate binding for undo, and the reason that it's different is because in the editor is the one that actually forced me to make an undo key binding, like one that actually is called undo, because in the editor, like pushing Control Z is the undo, but you can also push U and I, which are the technical key bindings for undo, the secondary key bindings, I guess, for undo and redo. But yeah, it's not great. Also, I'm not sure why the right stick is showing up right now. The right stick should be bound to game button, like view left or something like that. What is it called? Game button left. View left, yeah. So why does the right stick show up purple here? I also, this guy, we can do similar to what we did before. Oops. Why is that weird looking? What did I do? This guy is missing an open parentheses. That's why. Okay. Is game button down. And not reduce display mode. That doesn't really do anything different, except for the fact that it no longer shows you when I'm pressing the X button. So when we draw analog sticks, I guess we want the same thing. We don't actually want to offset them. Oh, that's why. Yeah, because when I draw the analog sticks, there's a totally different it's a totally different part of code. So, okay. That's why the right analog stick is drawing purple right now. So we offset this somewhere here. Where the heck does that happen? So the button rec, here we go. So right now it shows the stick moving when you move the stick. And so we're going to get rid of that in reduce mode. Reduced display mode. Oops. Not reduced display mode is the only time we want to actually show it. Alright, so now it doesn't actually show the stick moving. Alright, and then we also are drawing primary button, secondary button. So the actual, interesting, I've just so happened to name them different variable names, but that was not on purpose. So primary game button versus primary button, which begs the question of whether or not this stuff should be inside like here, except for these two share the same thing. That's the problem. These two share some of the same variables, but then the analog stick is completely different because there's more than one key bound to the analog sticks. So yeah, I mean, that's fine. We'll just remember that we have some extra variables here that happen to be named slightly different than the other ones. So we probably need to essentially copy this guy. Man, I feel like my code is worse when I'm streaming it, but maybe it's just because I think about it more. Maybe it's always that bad. Alright, so we don't need to check accept cancel or whatever because those are not going to be bound to the analog sticks, and so yeah. But these are the ones we actually want for if it's a reduce thing, and game button down is this check here, which is interesting because this looks a lot different than the other check. So if the game button down for primary or secondary and those exist, or the hovering button exists where the gamepad is connecting, but why does that look more complicated than this guy? The game button is down. Oh, is this guy just old? What does this other guy do? Does he check both primary and secondary? He didn't get formatted nicely. Let's do that. He also didn't get the same thing. So that's interesting. I guess that makes sense. So basically the way I did it is like if you press the primary button. No, that still doesn't make sense. If the game button that is bound to, oh, so this you only need to check both. You only need to check primary and secondary if a single key is bound to both the primary and secondary key binding. It's the only time it would make a difference, and even then, it would only make a difference if it was bound. Yeah, it would only show the primary key binding would turn it white. So okay, that's fine. I'll just do it that way. That's fine. So when I wrote, where is it? It's in the gamepad stuff. So this guy also checks just game button. This guy here doesn't need to check both primary and secondary. Oh, because the reason he checked both is because he didn't actually make... Let's just reuse the same variables here, right? So, this guy gamepad button. So we're going to use the same variable names here. secondary game button, and game button, and you don't need the second check here. Hovering game button equals secondary game button. And this one also just is game button. And you almost didn't really like. No, okay, you do need to check it, I guess. But okay, so this guy is like this. Boom. He has two things around him. Why is that? It's because this guy's got two things around him? Okay. So this can be replaced now with his game button now. Reduce display mode. Alright, so now the right analog stick doesn't show up as purple, and we also don't get any white directional things showing up when I press the stick around. I feel like this feels bad if you haven't actually used the input before, because it feels like I'm just getting rid of cool functionality. It's like, now it doesn't do this cool thing. Isn't that great? All right. So we should probably fix our problem of the undo and reset showing up incorrectly here. So activate, and we really just want to show this guy as the undo button. And then we actually do need to show the R button as the reset button. And that guy is actually technically the right bumper. Is where he's bound. It's the name of the game button. I mean, it doesn't really make that much sense if you aren't me. So, so the undo is showing up. The primary key binding for undo is that. Oh no, yeah, that's why it looks weird. Is because when we go here, right, we're saying that the undo game button shows up as reset, right? And the cancel button showing up as undo. And so it really shouldn't be that way. I mean, the cancel button can show up as undo, but what we actually really want is the reset button shows up as the right bumper, right? And so now we want to actually make sure that that shows up correctly. So the undo button isn't really used. We want the right bumper. Yeah, and now these guys are kind of, somewhat backwards, right? But they are showing correctly now, right? So activate, undo, reset, move. I kind of have a lot of stuff on the left-hand side of the keyboard, but so I mean, we can just, a lot of this is manually put in anyways, right? And so when we actually go to place the keyboard text positions, remember how we're putting them at 0.5, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, we could move these around so that like 3 of them are kind of grouped together on the left-hand side here. We could even just like, let's just do percentages. I mean, I know that dividing by 4 look better, but we're just gonna do this by percentages. So this guy, if we want to keep what we had before, 2, 5, 2, so 3, 7, 5. and then that's halfway, so 0.5625. And 75% plus 0.125, so 875. 875. I'm not sure why that last one took me out, but that should do the same thing. Yeah. So they don't have to be super nice numbers here. I mean, it's totally fine if we don't do that. So like, let's just say like 0.1, and then like 0.3. I mean, we'll just try that. 0.4. And this guy could just be like 7.5, right? Something like that. Whoops, this guy is probably getting mad because it's not a floating point. It's a double instead of a float. Yeah. Why do the undo and reset look so close together? It's probably because they are close together. That's why. So 2.5? That's, I mean, what's halfway? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks a lot better. This can just honestly be like 0. Let's make it like 0.5 and like 1.5. 0.4 still seems like it's going to be way far out there, but 0.2, 2.75. Now, since these are all weird variables, okay, this guy does need to be farther. All right. I mean, that looks good. The only problem we have with this is like when we do go to do internationalization, those strings are going to be different sizes, and so they might not actually be spaced out enough. But we care more about how spaced they are, like in this. Oh, also this width, the width of this line should probably be scaled with the keyboard scale. So let's do that real fast. So these guys are probably going to be like chopped in half, so. There you go, that looks nice. You do get some weirdness, like I was thinking about when I originally made this. Like this black kind of overlaps on top of these guys. Which, you know, not great, but it's not a big deal right now. I do like the way that this black makes it look as it goes across the other stuff. What we could do is just like bring this black up a little bit so that it actually starts like back here somewhere. But in order to do that, you have to take like a vector from the end, or you know, like from the start to the end, and then normalize it and then multiply it by some value. So it's just a little more code, and I don't know, didn't feel like writing it right then. The move, so one thing we could do, one of the ways that we could make this a lot nicer, honestly, is like you could like move the undo up like a whole line height so that even if he's super wide, he like draws on top of the other two. Or you could do the other way around where the other two draw up a little bit and the undo is down here. And so that way, like if these guys are super wide, they take a lot more space before they start overlapping. That's a good idea. I like that idea. It's not too hard to do either. That's why it's a good idea. Easy ideas are good ideas. So this one and this one. RC line height. Right, so those will work a lot better. To be fair, the undo could technically still like kind of overlap with these lines here. Maybe not so nicely, but it's fine. I think you'd still be able to read it even if that happened. So, activate, undo, reset, move. That seems right, I think. Hopefully. I guess we should probably change what the primary key binding is for undo so that undo shows up over here. And then you could make use of the space a lot better then. Why do I keep thinking of good ideas after I've done stuff? It's fine. I'm going to keep it this way for now. Backspace does make more sense to people generally, I think, as an undo button. But, I mean, they'll just start the game and this will be what it tells them. So, hopefully they'll learn that. I should probably... Okay, so here's another thing I need to do, honestly, is... So once you actually continue here, press X to continue. If you actually go into the settings here, it looks a lot different. It's, you know, got some extra options and I got stuff down here, but if you go into the control screen is so broken right now. There's no way to rebind stuff right now. It does show this, which maybe would help you remember. Like my main concern here is people start up the game, they see the little explanation of the buttons, but they don't pay attention to it, so they continue playing the game, and then they want to know what the buttons were for doing stuff. So they go into the settings and they go to controls, and the controls menu looks terrible. So maybe we should just make the controls menu look the exact same, or, you know, use the same exact code to render stuff here, so that even though this stuff doesn't work, at least it has the same exact little display. So hopefully that'll help them remember. Does this actually, and this doesn't actually swap out right now, but so yeah, I feel like that's a good idea. Probably. We will do that. Just not at the moment. So I have to actually go delete the save right now and restart since I got to the main menu. Once you get to the main menu, it actually makes your new game save, and so then if you started the game up, it wouldn't go to this little reduced settings menu that I'm working on. Little piggy bank. Oh, interesting. This looks weird. That guy's chopped off on the left. It's because it's like just barely large enough. Okay, that's one problem, I guess. This guy can get chopped off on the left, and technically this guy, if he got really long, but he'd have to be like all the way over here to get chopped off. So I guess let's move him out a bit. I guess he really just shouldn't be to the left at all. But you know, with other text showing up there, there's always the possibility that he gets kind of large. I also should probably normalize the text positions. I could normalize them when I actually go to draw text using these positions. So, down, way in the down here, reduce display mode, text pose, text pose equals vec2 round pose. Doesn't look any different, but it really shouldn't look that much different. Mostly just like rounding the position of the text keeps us from having weird subpixel sampling problems, which I technically could solve without like having linear sampling on, but doing some fun in the shader. But for now, I just align everything to pixels so that hopefully it doesn't round weird and add. Yeah, it's hard to explain without showing a visual of it, but basically it just makes it look a little more crisp sometimes. All right, this looks good. This doesn't look good yet. We need to actually draw stuff here. Oh, and the undo needs to be rebound differently. And the continue button doesn't actually show up properly. I think I had continue be the start, and so that's why it's not showing up here properly. So like if we go, no. So that's in the settings menu when we render extra stuff. This thing here. I could probably switch the order of this, by the way, because we probably want this continue hint to show up on top of the keyboard / gamepad visualization. Cancel. Oh, it's because this function isn't finished yet. Yeah, so we did it for keyboard and mouse. We didn't do it for Xbox controller and PlayStation controller. let's do that. So for this, it's going to be gamepad bindings, game button, gamepad buttons, gamepad button. Boom. And it's basically the same for this guy, but he actually oh, whoops, we have Xbox controller and PlayStation controller switched. But call different function to render the Xbox visual. This guy. That's fine. We'll need to make this function because it doesn't exist right now. Same thing happens here. Gamepad bindings. Button position, pad button, draw gamepad button anim. So the reason we hadn't completed this is because we only made one set of these functions, so we need to make gamepad versions of these functions. Get gamepad. I think this function is created. Oh, maybe not. Get where's that other one? Do we not have that function? Oh, it's because it's different for each one. Yeah, so we need to specify. So we're gonna have PlayStation button anim size. PlayStation button should be free, game button is icon wide, and then this guy should take is wide, and this guy should also do the same thing. Is wide equals false. UI is also 0. If is wide, physical null pointer. There we go. This is my crude way of returning two values at once, but having the second value be optional as I give a pointer and I set it optionally or by default to null pointer, and then I put a condition. I put an if statement around every single time I write it. Since I don't want to put this if statement inside any place that I want to set is wide to true here, I make a temporary variable called is wide, and then I set the output one to the variable that I made, and it works, but it's not wonderful. So we'll do the same thing here. And honestly, I think what I did up there was I put the default here because it kind of looks not as great to have a default case. Might as well just do that. Great. So these guys now return. They have the ability to return a wide frame. PlayStation. Button sheet center. Yep. So this guy is ready. Draw PlayStation. Button anim. Yeah, game. Pad. And the rest should be the same. Now, it is actually a little different because for the keyboard specifically, I set up these little sprites. This is the regular one, this is the wide one. And so it has a little animation where it goes back and forth between the two, and it offsets all of these text. It's a little hard to see these text things, but if I... Alright, so all these little white text things are used to draw on top of these buttons, so it uses the two sprites in conjunction. Whereas for the gamepad stuff, for Xbox and for PlayStation, we have like the button and the thing built in one right now, and I guess we shouldn't. So I think we're just gonna pull those apart over here. Boom, 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 boom. And this also should be deleted from the center. And then this guy, like that. And then we actually want to make a little animation here of some sort. So he can move down by 1. Let's move this guy up by 1. And this guy down by 1. Which means that these guys probably need to be moved up by 1. Same thing happens with this. Oh, interesting. So, yeah, these guys are technically different colors in the background. So we would need 4 different little animations. Or we would need to set this to pink and use the replace colors. But I think we'll just do 4 different animations. So we'll make the one green one, and then we'll make the other ones. Oops, I have that on continuous, or non-continuous and not restricted tile. So that's like that. This gets moved up. This gets moved down. Also, I guess one of the things we could do is like that. I guess that would look nice, right? Like it's getting pressed. I also could add like some little shading like I did in this one. I think this looks nicer. But it's basically the same exact sprite 5 times. So that's efficient. Oops, that's this guy. And then boom, boom. This guy, and I don't know why I need like a brighter blue here. You cannot you can't even tell the difference between the dark and the bright blue like I had them before. That's fine, right? All right. And then, like I did with the other ones, these need to be moved up by 1. Button saved, and then all right, so 8-6 is position of our first guy. Yeah, that's interesting. We almost want to get those out of the sheet frame thing here. Yeah, let's do that. Let's so the button frame is going to start out as vec2i 0. And we're going to get a third variable out of this function. Button frame. And we're going to do the same thing for this guy. Button frame. All right, so then we can do button frame equals new vec2i. And what did we say? 8-6. Except for that's for, oh yeah, PlayStation. Yeah. All of these guys, these 4 first guys, use that same sprite. The other guys I could pull out, but they're different for each of the buttons, so we don't actually really need to reuse. Oh, but they do need the animations, I guess. We'll find it. We'll do that later. We'll do everything later, you know? It's just button frame, and then button frame. For these guys, it is starting at 9.6, and we'll increment that by 1 for each of these guys. So 10, 11, and 12. ABXY. And then over here, whoops, no, it's in render functions. We pass in the button and the button frame. Yep, great. And that works great. So then this function should be done. And then down here, we had this thing, PlayStation, PlayStation, button anim. I keep doing that the wrong way around. Okay, PlayStation button anim. Field gamepad button. All right, it's gonna get mad at me. Yep. I feel like I have this like third sense. Like my subconscious knows if I made a bug. Like if I've typed code that isn't absolutely perfect. And so like I can almost predict if it's gonna have a compiler error. It's like the times that it doesn't, it's very rare nowadays for me to think that there's no bugs and to have it give me a bug. Like most of the time I know that it's possible. Sometimes I'm surprised, but a lot of times I'm correct. GameCAD, B-bindings. That sounds like a bad name, so that's probably why we didn't name it that. So, app settings.h. It is gamepad. Let's not repeat game twice in a row. Sounds like a good idea. Gamepad bindings. Now it doesn't show up anything there. Oh, that's funny. In trying to make it better, I have made it worse. Why does this not show up continue anymore? If I don't draw this guy, is he like... Maybe he's drawing on top of the continue. No. Maybe... Continue hint rec. Oh, maybe the continue hint rec is too big or something now. Menu functions. So this guy... Oh no, he doesn't even care about these functions that we just changed. So what is wrong with him? Oh, it's not showing it at all for those guys. Because these guys maybe are setting the viewport. Maybe that's what it is. So when we do this... Yeah, that's weird. Why did I do that? Okay. So our render context has some internal state. So if you set the viewport, but you don't set it back to what it was before, like I called this function and then tried to draw stuff after calling that function, and it didn't draw because it only draws stuff inside this rectangle that guy drew in. So like being cleanly about how you leave the render context was not something I did when I wrote these functions. Viewport equals RC viewport. So now the continue button doesn't, or like the little sprite next to continue doesn't show up. Why did that change? Did I just, oh, it's because I left to comment it out. That makes sense. You know? All right, there we go. Back to functionally equivalent. All right. Let's go. Oh, okay, that's what I want. Hey, look at that. Ain't that a beauty? That looks like the wrong color of red. It's more of like, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it's like a pink. It's like a really red color. It's like an orange. It's like a light orange. What if we just do orange straight out? Maybe that will look red. But doesn't actually look correct. What if we do like that color? That looks kind of correct, except for, oh, this guy is not even the correct color at all. He's like a purple color. He's like, he is somewhere around here. Yeah, wow, I totally had the wrong color for that. Man, I couldn't draw a triangle. Drawing a triangle in pixels is not an easy thing to do. It doesn't look great. All right. We can't even really see the other ones right now, but you know, it does make a difference. I think that red is a lot better for the PlayStation controller. All right, so we're pretty close. Now we've got the keyboard showing up correctly, but now we just need to position the 4 different positions we have here for these texts, right? We need to do the same thing for the gamepad, and then the rest of it's basically the same code that we already did. The gamepad does seem really small still. I don't know why that is. So let me try real fast. That's over here, we're in the wrong place. In app input.cpp. Nope. App input display. Extra lines here. Let's visualize our gamepad rec. So if we do draw rectangle gamepad rec, we should see what our rectangle is for the gamepad. Yeah, it's tiny. Why is that so tiny? Is it like right on the edge of being larger maybe? Or no, it's the same thing. I didn't change this guy. That's fine. Oh. It's the same divided by 2 on the height that I didn't fix in the other function. Hey, now he's massive. I think the difference here was that the gamepad is a lot larger, or it's got a lot less aspect ratio, or is that more aspect ratio? It's, you know, the width and height are about the same. It's more square-like than the keyboard is, and so it doesn't fit this section quite as well. So it's getting a lot smaller. That's cool. That's actually really big and nice feeling. So yeah, like I was explaining, I almost want to, rather than I can't use my keyboard up top. I can't move my mouse to indicate where I'm talking about, because then it'll change back to the mouse and keyboard display. But rather than having the text show up, yeah, the chair is probably squeaky, probably. Rather than have the text show up above the gamepad, I think having it show up like left and right would be a lot better. So if we do that, we have 3 controls that are on the buttons on the right, and then only 1 thing that's on the left thumbstick or the D-pad. So I guess that's fine. We'll just put all 3 controls, like the activate, the cancel, or the activate, the undo, and the reset are all buttons on the right-hand side of the controller, and then we'll draw the move on the left-hand side. But I guess that does, well, no, we're gonna use the alignment. It's hard to explain. I mean, you'll see. You'll see what I do. So the same thing we did here, but different. All right, so for the X position, the first guy, now the order is going to be weird maybe, but let's say the first guy is in the movement, and I think we can actually have a different order for the gamepad than the keyboard. So we're just going to set him as 0. So basically he's going to be all the way on the left-hand side of the controller, and he's going to draw right aligned so that, you know, he extends out to the left there. And then the other guys are just going to be like gamepad size dot width for the X. They're all going to be the same X position. That's not what I meant to do. You know, I think I did actually buy WD-40. I could probably make this chair less squeaky. I guess that is a thing I could do. All right, so the Y position. Here's where we actually had like. Ooh, cool. That's the gem wall, I assume. Did you pull the latest changes that I made to that? I guess you did because I told you about it. So. You know, we actually want those. Ah, shoot. Boo, boo, boo. This guy's going to be like a negative this, I guess. But it's still around here. And then, so these guys, for the Y position, we don't need the negative size stuff. And we actually just want to do gamepad size dot height divided by 2. Yeah. Yeah, I assume that the mic has a lot to do with it, to be fair, right? Like, the mic is just sitting on the desk, so I assume you're probably hearing a bunch of ambient noise from the computer running, and then my keyboard is extremely loud, and then I'm kind of farther away I'm farther away from the mic than both of those things are, so I assume that like most of the stream is just me clacking and like I'm just like in the background mumbling like, and that's why like nobody's watching, is because I just look crazy, right? Yeah, exactly. So, you know, this is mostly what do they call it? The ASMR, right? This is like ASMR of Taylor's life. You get to hear all the other stuff a lot louder than me actually explaining stuff. That's good. I think at the beginning I was talking pretty quiet, mostly because literally nobody was there. It's very hard to actually like knowingly talk to yourself. At least I don't talk to myself very often, and so I find it funny. Okay, so we don't want them all to be centered on the height. Okay, that's good. Is the quality of the stream good? I mean, I haven't actually really checked too much. I assume it was fine. I have streamed before for some other random stuff. Man, if you go on YouTube, you can probably find an old video of me doing a Princess Dungeon Smasher stream of programming. It's not that long ago. It's like over in Utah when I was living with Bryson. But not my. What's funny is you know, a year from now, I'm gonna think I look funny doing this. I feel like it always, no matter what I do, I always feel like my old self is stupid looking to me. All right, so like 2.5, 5.0. Oh, actually, this guy is halfway, right? And this guy is 2.5, and 5.0, and then 7.5, and then oops. RC center offset is what we actually want for all of these guys. Great. That actually should work, honestly. And if it doesn't, we'll figure it out. Cool. I find it funny. I feel like there's very few people that actually watch programming streams, but I'm one of those people. So like, I feel like this stuff is interesting to watch. I like seeing other people work on things and seeing how they do it, but maybe that's not a common occurrence. And at the same time, I find it hilarious because it's like, it seems like such a boring thing if you try and explain it to other people. It's like, why would you watch somebody else do work? That seems ridiculous. So like the fact that there's not that many people is not very surprising. It's like you know, it's like I'm doing a little show and the only people that showed up are my mom, except for instead of my mom, it's you and Kyle. So yeah, there's random other people. I don't know. I posted it on our game devs Discord, or actually maybe I didn't do it there. I posted it on Handmade Network. I posted it on our Discord, and I feel like one other place. But I don't care that much how many people are here. It honestly just takes like consistency for people to actually care, I feel like, right? And so this is mostly just like practice for me talking to myself. So hopefully it's entertaining. Yeah, it took me a bit. I'm not that good at looking over to the Twitch chat, so. But at the same time, compared to I don't know if Kyle is here, but I'm watching Kyle, not Kyle here, but the Kyle Donnelly Twitch stream for making D-leveled. If you ever look up Toaster Fuel, watching him, like almost all the streams I've seen, like 80% of the time is just him talking to people in the chat, and then like a little bit of coding on the side. So hopefully I'm a little better than that. Or maybe I'm a little worse than that. Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe that's what you're supposed to do on Twitch. It's just talk to people. Alright, so I've got those positions correct now, probably. Except for this. I guess we should have a different define for, maybe. So both? Can I have both? Yeah. All right. So now that we have those positions, we need to do basically the same thing we were doing up here. Draw reduced mode text displays. Like this. And we have 4 of them, and so the first one is going to be left. And then the other ones from top to bottom, because triangle should be reset. So we should have right bumper and then cancel, which is undo, and then accept. So that is move, that is reset, that is undo, and that is activate. Like that. And then we do gamepad buttons, gamepad button, gamepad bindings, game button, number of gamepad buttons, gamepad buttons. If it is a gamepad, it's not alternate, and the button, actually it's going to be, where is the structure? It's going to be if the gamepad btn equals the gamepad btn. Button equals button. And then this, instead of drawing from the top left of the button, you're saying that the new types, or like the new sections that I added, you didn't like because the gem looks different? I might have, I wasn't super, I didn't take a bunch of time working on it. So I think there was probably some shading stuff that I didn't do correctly. I did most of it, but I didn't do all of it perfectly fine. But I did it at the point where I couldn't really tell the difference, and I was fine with it. So yeah, I don't know exactly what your methodology was for how the gems should be shaped or what they should look like, but did I add extra yellow? I guess I didn't mean to. I meant to try and copy what you had for other things. Sure, yeah. Yeah, again, it's just like I didn't know exactly what was in your mind when you were making it, so I was just trying to look at stuff and predict what the idea was. Alright. So instead of the top left, or sorry, instead of the top middle, we actually want the left. But we want like, so let's just do this, right? So we're gonna do if t index equals 0. Actually, not if. We're doing a ternary thing, so an if, but of a different form. 0, otherwise the width. So that would be the left-hand side of the button for the first game button that we're drawing, but the right-hand side of all the other ones. And that's actually button rec.x plus button rec.width. Button rec.y plus button rec.height. All right. And that honestly should do it. Let's see. Nope, errors. Keyboard scale, not a thing here. We have gamepad scale. It's like a single error that comes back to haunt you many times. Keyboard rec, also not keyboard rec here. Gamepad rec. Reduce text pose, which we didn't initialize beforehand, so that's this part. So after this guy, gamepad rec. Might not have actually changed it. Okay, let's see. I think we didn't rename these guys up here, so they're actually setting the keyboards. Yeah. So that should fix it. Well, that's kind of correct. Not perfect. All right. So instead of center, we actually want to. Let's instead of doing this weird thing. So bool left side equals false. This guy specifically. Left side equals true, and then instead of switching off of t index equals 0, where the heck is that? Oh, I'm in the wrong place. I have wandered astray into the wrong place. Okay, like that. So yeah, instead of saying t index equals 0, we can just say if it's on the left side, and then same thing happens for this guy on the left side. We need alignment right. On the right side, we need alignment left. That's better. Okay. Now the position of the text needs to be centered. So we go text pose equals line end pose plus 0, and then yeah, and then this. So we actually want this guy to be for the x, and then we want RC center offset. Like that. And hey, reset is actually showing the correct button. Oh no, the reset should show the triangle button. So I guess it's not really correct, but these ones we also can probably. Welcome back. We can probably put these a lot closer together, to be fair. I don't know. They're fine for now. The left-hand side isn't showing up correctly. I'm not sure why that is. I guess maybe the bound button isn't being found. It's the left button. Let's go to settings.cfg. So okay, so left stick left. He's not fine. That's what it is. He's looking for, yeah. So the primary key binding is this. So if we, the actual secondary gamepad binding, where is that? Game alt pad binding. Yeah, so it's just up, down, left, right for this, but then it's left stick, up, down, left, right for these guys. So like that, and then if we, is that a command? It is a command. Good job, past me. That is not the right, I mean, you gotta pat your friend on the shoulder to move. That's what this tells me. The mythical button that is off the controller. So that's weird. Why is it? It is finding. It's not like the 0 position either. It's like some random position. Where is it finding that? If game button equals game button. And then let's do get gamepad name. Get gamepad So this should print out a bunch of stuff. He is finding the 4th index. Left, that seems right. They can stop that from outputting. All right, so why does he think it's all the way over there, though? Gamepad scale, button rec. Maybe he's, since it's left side, it's 0. Oh! Yep, that's because of this. All right. So this should be like that. Hey. And left side negative this, or on the right side positive that. So now you got a little padding between the E and the line. That's looking a lot better. So now the setting config for so right bumper is the one that we actually show. We should change it to the reset. Is there a reset key binding? Maybe there's not. Is that why I'm all mixed up here? All right, game button T. All right, so I've named most of these. Yeah, so the sample button is C and F. I don't really want those to be reset because you could accidentally hit those. But what we really want is we want a reset button. It's like, it's the third. We honestly should rename this to interact, undo, and reset, or a reset for this guy. So, yeah, I mean, that's the real problem, is I had accept to cancel, and then all the rest are basically just the name of the gamepad version of it. And it's kind of terrible. And I don't need a lot of these, to be fair. Well, no, we do want all of these, but a lot of them are only used in the editor. So, I think this is fine for now. I think this does technically show you the correct thing, except for the right bumper should be highlighted, I guess. So let's double check that that's happening correctly. Input display, draw gamepad buttons. So we don't actually need the undo one, we want the right bumper. So that seems like a good place to leave it for now. Technically we want it to show that the triangle button is the one that does reset, because that is the one that does reset. Does it also mean that C and F actually reset right now? Hold on. So if I go play game. Yeah, that is kind of annoying. That's probably why people have accidentally pressed it before while I was playtesting. Because C is not all that far away from Z. And that resets you. And F also resets you. That's why triangle works to reset you on the gamepad, is because that's the sample button in the editor, and it's bound to F/C. In general, to be fair, right? How's that? Is it still? That can't be 4 times. Is it just not? mean, okay, so like something around here is probably better. Like I generally get right about there. So yeah, that should be about the same volume as me. Maybe something like this is a little better. I can also, I mean, one of the reasons it's actually playing music is because I deleted the settings and I almost always have the music turned off. Because, I mean, as great as the song is, it does get tiring after a while. Okay, anyways, yeah, so basically what I was talking about is you can actually hit C to reset on the keyboard right now, or F. They both work as the same thing because the sample button is bound to reset as well as the right bumper, and that's why on the controller you can press triangle to reset, but that isn't very nice on the keyboard with C and F. But anyways, all right. Well, I think that is good work for tonight. So I'm gonna log off. Maybe we'll have more people next time. I'm not sure exactly when I'm gonna stream next time. I'd like to do this weekend sometime. I have to go to family pictures on Saturday, but maybe Sunday or maybe Saturday morning. I don't know. I'll post another thing when I stream again if there's anybody else besides Devin that actually cares. But thanks for guys for joining me. Have a good night.